Attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar where we'll be talking about DevOps in the real world. My name's Ollie O'Donoghue and I'm the Head of Research and Insight here at SDI, and I'm joined by DevOps evangelist Matt Hooper from Ivanti. Hello Matt.
Hello Ollie, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. And yourself?
Doing great.
Cool. So I tell you what, I think before we get started into anything major, I'll just quickly say if you do have any questions throughout the webinar, pop them through the tool at the side of your screen there, and I'll ask those to Matt, and we'll try and cover a few of those throughout the webinar, and maybe have a bit of a Q&A session at the end. But I think the plan is, Matt, to have quite an engaging, informal conversation between the two of us and just cover some of those real-world examples of DevOps in practice.
Yeah, that sounds great. Looking forward to it.
I think I'll get started by talking about a little piece of research that we've been conducting here at SDI about DevOps to really figure out what's going on in the industry. It's primarily UK-based, this piece. But what it's saying to us is that there are about 31% of UK service desks are currently following a DevOps approach. That's 31% of IT organisations are currently following a DevOps approach. What are you seeing over there in the United States, Matt?
You know, it's much higher than that. And the research, if you ask IT operations, it's frequently sometimes a little less, percentage-wise, and that's because some IT operations, you know, the service desk, the network operations center, infrastructure services, they haven't fully gotten on board or shown that they have the cultural ability to change. So they're not always involved in some of these DevOps initiatives. So while the organization has embraced it in certain either business units or from the development side, they may be practicing a series of kind of continuous delivery, continuous release cycles, and self-support with feedback loops to business segments that IT operations doesn't even really know about it. So it's sometimes hard to get your arms around the actual data of using it. I would suspect that many organizations that you speak with, especially from the service desk side, they may not even be aware of some of the DevOps movements that are happening inside the organization. You know, where they're just, and when I define DevOps, I'm talking about that you know, continuous release, continuous delivery, immediate interaction with the end users or the end customers, where they can respond effectively to design decisions, technology decisions.
Cool. Yeah. So I guess the question, I suppose it's sort of the main driving force behind your presentation is where does the service desk and ITSM fit in with the DevOps environment?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think we first have to recognize is that we're seeing a changing landscape inside the business, right? We're in a digital economy. No one can deny that. And what we're seeing is that organizations are focused on having a digital strategy. So what that means is that traditional companies or traditional organizations, even if they're public sector or higher ed, they're becoming technology companies first. And then they're providing whatever service they provide afterwards, whether it's logistical services, transportation, hospitality, healthcare, financial. So we're in this world where IT is the business, and this means a drastic change for us in IT, especially on the service desk and support side. You know, we used to focus on doing tech support, right? That's what we called it in the 80s, kind of coming into the 90s. And then we had the systems management team. It was kind of that tier one. There was desktop services, the systems engineers, and then the help desk was then formulated to be the point of contact and interact with those to better support systems. We shifted into the 2000 to be really focused on services, and with the onset of things like ITIL and other things like that, we started to say, okay, well, we have all these IT services that we have to support. And so in the mid-2000s, there was a big focus on building out our catalogs of IT services, email, network, data services, database management, you know, mobile technologies, and all these other things. We sort of then morphed that into a little bit more of a maturity, where we started to focus a bit more on business services, such as, you know, quoting, rating, customer order, you know, kind of the order to cash processes, and understanding that, okay, wait a second, our technology is interacting so much more with our end customers. We need to raise the level. So there's been a lot of talk about that. I've certainly spent the better half of 2010 to 2014 speaking about, let's abandon IT services and focus on business services. Let's align our asset towards business services so that the support desk, when someone says, hey, I can't place an order, doesn't have to translate that, right? Kind of the old simulation games we used to play. We had to, translate all the different terms back to IT. Let's get IT talking business terms, right?
Yeah.
We've even changed more now, right? We're focused on experiences. And, in your research, your focus is doing this kind of research for SDI and looking out at what are service desks trying to do and where they're focused on. I'd venture to say that in probably the past 2 years, more and more it has been on improving the quality experience of supporting end users, or if that service desk supports end customers, and I do differentiate the two, and we'll talk about that later, what that experience is like for that customer or end user, and how they are having an interaction. The data lookup. So our focus in IT really now has been creating better experiences, and that still doesn't devoid us of some of the fundamental things like performance, availability, security, disaster recovery. In fact, it probably puts a bigger emphasis on those things, but it changes the way in which we provide those capabilities. So then the question is, what's DevOps, right? What is that, and what does that mean to those who support the world? And if you look at it, this is taken from the State of the DevOps report. That's a Puppet Labs document that comes out. They have organizations that practice these things 200 times more frequently releases, but they also do 24 times faster recovery from failures. And what this does is this frees them up to have a significant amount more time spent on planned work. They're spending less time on unplanned work or rework. Right? So how does a company get into this continuously releasing and continuously changing? It's a significant challenge. They're not going to do it with all of these pressures that they have coming at them. We have more demanding users. We have audits, more complex applications, ransomware. We're trying to improve our self-service. It's just a lot of stuff, right? So it fundamentally comes back to a couple of things, and that's why you'll hear in DevOps all the time, it's about culture. Do we have the culture to take us to the next level? And while it's a bit extreme to say change or die, the reality is that our focus has a lot been on being a service provider and making our services highly efficient and highly effective. And that's starting to shift. We're starting to see a shift in focus. It's not so much about making the IT services highly efficient and highly effective. It's not even so much about providing the best IT capabilities. Sometimes what it is it's about going out and testing digital strategies for their effectiveness. And so we've got this kind of tug of war with frameworks right now. Is ITIL the right one? Is IT for IT? Is DevOps? Is it agile frameworks? So we're in a very confused state right now inside of IT about, okay, what is our purpose and what is our goal? So it's really important for us to look at the organizations that are exhibiting those characteristics where the frequent changes gives business value, their ability to recover from failure gives business value, and being more efficient by spending less time on unplanned and rework gives business value. Well, how do we get there, right? That's what we need to ask ourselves.
Yeah, it's interesting you mention frameworks actually, because that's one of the topics that we tried to nail down in this piece of research as well. So we asked kind of, do you believe the DevOps approach and DevOps culture can work with formalized IT frameworks? And 93% of the respondents said yes, and we kind of asked them to drill down a little bit into which ones they thought would work, and ITIL cropped up quite a lot. So what are your thoughts on how DevOps fits in with frameworks?
Yeah, so if we took a look at ITIL, right, and where they are now and the things that they're talking about, they're saying all the right things, right? Supporting business outcomes, enabling business change, managing risk, showing value, focused on these value streams, continually improving, optimizing the customer experience. This slide is directly taken from Axelos's website, right? So this is great. These are great things to say. And, Kaimar, who heads up the ITIL disciplines over at Axelos, is rapidly trying to change the mindset, bring clarification to the market, because the reality is this, and I think Kaimar knows it and everybody else knows it. The original ITIL libraries left a lot to interpretation, and many times the interpretation was focused heavy-handedly on control and command. It was very focused on having these very tight structures, and you have this, real challenge of looking at all of these processes and all of these roles, and you literally saw people put, people in charge of things like a problem manager. Now, in very large organizations, that might make sense, because there needs to be someone who just basically says, hey, listen, in general, this is how you can resolve infrastructure fragility better. This is how you can do root cause analysis. This is how we can better validate and manage our configuration management so that we can find things faster. And, just kind of out there as an internal champion for the value and effectiveness of problem management. But that didn't really happen in most organizations. What happened is someone got labeled problem manager, and they were going to fix all the really big incidents.
Yeah.
And now you had two queues, two project teams, two people trying to manage this. This person didn't have deep technical expertise in the network, deep technical expertise in the database, deep technical expertise in the web services or infrastructure. Didn't have deep technical expertise in code. So they weren't really respected by the teams who could dive deep, right? So that's this whole role failed. When I think interpreted properly, a problem manager was, Batman's Bruce Wayne, right? You are the network engineer by day, and by night, you go in and you look at your reports and say, okay, where am I seeing some trends, and what am I doing for the network? So you played that role as problem manager. That never really got interpreted. So when you think of that, what has happened, and one of the problems with most IT is we're being pressured to be innovators, but we because of our training, because of our upbringing, because of the risk associated with change, because of the lack of communications or systems to collaborate more effectively, what we have thought is, in order to support our business growth, we need to develop new technologies and products and really make sure that they're focused on operational excellence. In reality, what has grown companies and been most effective for organizational growth and meeting true market domination has been a test, fail, improve mentality. Being disruptive, trying new things at a rapid pace and validating the market. And so you see organizations like an Uber come into the marketplace and be a technology company that's providing logistics services and transportation services and becoming a global leader in a very short period of time, because they're willing to try and test. They first started with the limousine drivers, and then they moved into just general people having a car to be accessible. And now they're even saying, well, if people have a car and they have some time, well, why can't they pick up lunch for somebody? Now they've released a whole new Uber Eats application and are getting restaurants to buy into this and building new business models around food delivery services. It won't be long before you start seeing them, kind of compete with UPS and FedEx, right? Where Amazon distribution centers can leverage Uber drivers to deliver things in a more real-time, faster delivery services. So people don't have to go to a Home Depot. They can go to an Amazon delivery center to get that product and be delivered. Right, so there's these new things that are happening that are very disruptive, but they're all driven by technology. And so it begs the question: well, who is IT, right? If you ask the kind of ITIL people about business requirements. They would say, well, you know, we design things based on business requirements. The business gives us, the business owns the risk. The business sets the service level agreement. The business sets the outcome. Well, in Uber, who's the business? And who's IT? Right? At Netflix, who's the business and who's IT? And so that's one of the challenges, right? So while the framework can be useful and it does give great things to think about, there are some underpinnings of it that have to change, you know, such as context like this from the practitioner guide. It says the service provider must therefore determine who the customer is in each situation. Well, this is a very true statement. But when you look at it in reality, this is how IT sees the customer. When I speak with most people, and even you know, at Ivanti with my professional services team, I'm constantly reminding them, hey, listen, you know, when you're designing processes or we're implementing the ITSM solutions, this is an opportunity to educate our customers. Remind them that they don't work at Ivanti, they're a customer of us. And so when they speak customer terms, they should be speaking of customers who don't work in their organization. That their internal business departments are partners. This is a cross-functional delivery capability we're talking about. And we need these partners. We need to interact with them. So ITC is this kind of, you know, internal customer, and we'll see that term. But this is how the business sees it, right? They see IT as a capability.
Yeah, yeah.
They know that we have vendors who will provide infrastructure, data center, networking services, technologies for us, and they're going to support our business lines. And they don't need IT to own everything, and they actually don't even want to really be treated as a customer, right? They want to be serviced. They want to have you complete your action items and deliver on your tasks, but they also you know, want an outcome, and they want IT to focus on that outcome. And so if we could change the way that we viewed ourselves, if we could change IT's mindset a little bit, it helps. And that's what we're seeing in kind of these high-performing organizations. They don't see themselves in a role where they're disconnected. It's not IT and the business, it's IT is the business. And as they're looking at all these things, high-performing IT organizations don't look at BYOD and shadow IT in a negative light. They recognize that this was IT's failure to deliver. No employee ever came into an organization and said, hey, listen, you know, besides the money you're paying me, can I spend my personal money on getting a new MacBook Pro? Can I spend my personal money on getting a new iPhone? Right? They went and did these things because they didn't want to wait for IT, or they didn't want to have a BlackBerry or a Lenovo, right? Because that's not what they were educated on. That's not what they personally used. It wasn't something that they had. They didn't want to carry around two devices. So it never became, BYOD never became something because somebody didn't want to, you know, wanted to go spend their own money. It's just they wanted an outcome and capability. It's the exact same thing with shadow IT. The only person who calls shadow IT is IT people.
Yeah, yeah. So I think you're right. Yeah, definitely.
The business doesn't call it shadow IT. They call it business. They call it getting things done, right?
So do you think that, so when you look at kind of almost the behavioral economics of shadow IT and DevOps, there are quite a few similarities really about that just overarching desire just to get things done. Do you think there's a connection between the two? So sometimes I hear almost DevOps described as shadow IT but with corporate budget.
Yeah, and again, that's you know, usually IT operations people describing it that way.
Yeah.
You know, with you know, from a business perspective, it's called creating agility so that you can validate market space. You know, that's how we would define it. It's like we don't really know what we want yet. We want something digital. We want something mobile. We want it cloud-based so that it's accessible, scalable. But we don't want to overly invest in something that's not going to be. We don't want to over-engineer this thing. We want to rapidly validate how user behavior will work, what that experience truly will be. And when you look at the primary services that IT has delivered, a lot of them have become commoditized. You know, it's funny. It's funny and it's not funny. Nicholas Carr in 2003, he was a Harvard professor. He wrote this article called "IT Doesn't Matter." Very provocative. Now, in 2003, Amazon was a bookstore. We forget that sometimes. We forget that that's how Amazon started, right? And when you think of what he's talking about in that article, and I encourage everybody to go read it, he basically was saying that when something becomes so readily available, but it's consequential to their operation, it actually becomes more of a risk than an advantage. And so things like, networking services, way back in the day, and I'm dating myself here, we used to have private networks to connect our sites. We would use these different VPN protocols that they weren't VPN, they were called SDLC. They were used to go over public lines, but they were just connecting us direct to our sites. Now everybody uses the internet with VPNs, right? Because it's more ubiquitous, it's readily available. In 2003, in this article, Nicholas Carr said that there will become a day where these IT services will be so commoditized that you'll buy them over the internet. And again, Amazon was a bookstore in 2003. Now they're the leading provider of IT services with Amazon Cloud Services, data storage, infrastructure, compute, all the networking services that they provide, right? What a massive statement to make in 2003. But the reality is he was just following trends. He was looking at how the culture is changing, how business was changing. He analyzed it and compares it to like railroad services. There used to be companies who had their own railroad tracks. Well, after a while, that doesn't make any sense, right? Why don't we interconnect these tracks, make them available to everybody, and then our trains can take different and faster routes. Same thing with electricity. Companies used to provide their own electricity, their own power stations. But then after a while, that doesn't make any sense, right? Let's just all create a grid network that we can tap into that. And that's exactly what's happened with technology, including IT.
Yeah, so I mean, on that point, I mean, really what we're talking about there is disconnected units suddenly coming together to collaborate. And one of the key points that we found in our research, and I appreciate it from a service desk perspective, we asked kind of what benefits do you most associate with DevOps, and the highest by considerable margin was boosted collaboration with other IT teams. So a lot of service desk and IT service management professionals are really looking at DevOps as the opportunity they need to break down some barriers. Is that something that you think is a core benefit of DevOps, or is that just an example of that very specific service management perspective?
I think it's absolutely core, and I think that is one of the fundamental differences. If you look at how support has morphed and what's happening now, there is no doubt in my mind tier one is going to go away in the future. It's just not going to be needed, and here's why. As practices become more transparent, and one of the things about the DevOps culture is they're very open to sharing. They're very open to sharing how they're releasing product, how they're validating product, how they're testing new technologies, how they're managing their infrastructure. It's a very, very open community where you're seeing a lot of the repetitive use of tools be used, and then this peer and whole what they call chat ops aspect of collaboration that's working is now enabling support to become more real time by others who are in the same experience. So if you think and put this convergence together, what's going to happen in the future is more and more people are going to be using the same cloud services and the same technologies, and as those things fail, the awareness of this becomes immediate to those who are all using it, and they collaborate on how to get around it, right? And so with that, the ability to do communications automatically, to even predictively see failures or workarounds and proactively communicating those to end users, you're going to see more of this driven from an AI perspective, where artificial intelligence systems or machine learning systems are going to watch behaviors and push this really what is a manual and unnecessary function into the technology. Now that might scare a lot of service desk people, but they shouldn't be. because there's still a great opportunity here for work. There's still a human work effort that still needs to be happened. You know, value will never truly be something that is systematic. Its value will always be something from a human element standpoint. But that also means that we have to kind of change our identity. We have to rethink who we are in what we provide. And so the way that I look at it is kind of at a couple different levels. First off, the identity of IT is changing. If we compare traditional IT versus DevOps, we see that they're not seeing themselves as service providers. So if those kind of thoughts about, you know, the next 3 to 5 years worry or concern service desk people or tier 1 or you know, customer service folks, it starts with, who are you? What are you? If you're just a service provider and anybody who's not in your group and anybody not in IT is your customer, well, then you're already isolating yourself. You are already setting yourself out as not a trusted partner and helping towards the digital growth. And if you are a proponent of having different teams be functionally organized instead of outcome organized, well, that's also separating you. That's reducing your overall value. So instead of having like a project management office and a development team and operations, what we're seeing in these high-performing organizations is those teams are coming together in really small groups focused on particular outcomes. Because they don't see themselves as IT and there's the business, they see themselves as the IT is the business. And what this means is that they don't do things for IT's sake. They do things for business projects. So for instance, when most service desks send out quality metrics, they're based on what they call customer surveys. And think about what those customer surveys are typically asking. They're asking a bunch of information about the quality of the support, knowledge of the user, and things like that. In my rudimentary research, nothing like you do, Ollie, but what my research has told me is most of these people, they haven't asked the simple question of, did we measure it internally first? Right? Did we look at our call wait times? Do we look at how the average call lengths? Have we broken that down by analysts? Have we listened to the call ourselves? Right? Have we gone through the own internal quality review process? Have we gone through the own internal improvement process first before we went to the end users or our business partners or our end customers and asked them for these things? See, these kind of projects, when we're just sending out stats to send them out, we're getting surveys back so we can justify IT spend or IT headcount or these things. They're IT projects, not business projects. I know we can do the same effort, but we can do it from a business perspective. We know, and the business knows as a whole, the executives inside the organization know that the speed in which IT can resolve things improves the organization. The satisfaction of knowing and interacting with IT builds trust. They know these things. Right? So let's refocus those as business projects. Let's demonstrate that we have the ability to be digital leaders, right? By repositioning the way that we are focused on it. If we're just coming at it as an IT service provider, then that's not going to work so well because we're already separating ourselves. But if we show that we can enable digital strategies such as metrics, analytics, predictive analysis, and if our surveys are then utilized as a validation point or as a human validation point, well, then they're going to be much more valuable for us to actually make the improvements. Now, DevOps calls this feedback loops. So they measure systematically the releases, the changes, they're watching the speed and performance of page loads, systems, all these things. They're rapidly measuring these things. And then when their survey goes out, it doesn't have these questions like how long did you wait on the phone or did the person understand these things. They're actually tailored to, did the outcome you were looking for get accomplished efficiently and effectively? Did you see anything that you would make improvements to on this page? Or, you know, they're really asking, hey, you're a partner, and we're not going to get it right. So help us learn, help us understand what you would do different or why you can't achieve the outcome you're looking for. So then I'm taking an apologetic approach, as most service desks do. I think that's a really, really important point for your audience. Is sometimes in IT, we come at things with an apologetic approach. Like, well, we're sorry you failed, or we're sorry you waited so long, or we're sorry you had that issue.
Yeah, you know, I think you're right. You know, I did a piece fairly recently about reactive feedback over proactive feedback. So it is that kind of the reactive side of, you know, what did we do wrong? What did we do right? Whereas actually, if you spin the question round, then you could ask something far more valuable, like, what is it we can do to make you more productive today?
That's right.
And I think the organisation should be so surprised the insight they get from that, where very, very technically and digitally savvy workforce now can come back and say, do you know what, actually this application is what we need, or if you automated this aspect of what I do, then I can do so much more elsewhere.
And you know, when there's competing technologies in the environment, you know, such as like Dropbox or Google Drive or these kind of things, what I've seen in high-performing organizations is they will measure the effectiveness or the usage of these tools, and then they'll come back and they'll actually use that as part of their lead into the questions. Did you know that, you know, end users who are using this technology or using this process or using our self-service get their issues resolved at this speed of time? But people who call on this, we noticed you called in. Was there something about self-service that you didn't like? Were you not aware of this other technology? Again, that's a partnering approach. That's like, we're in this together, and I'm an enabler for you. You may not be aware, or maybe you didn't know, or maybe there was something that was holding you back, or maybe this is just the way that you've always done it, but do you realize that the way you've always done it has now become one of the worst ways you could do it? That's not an apologetic approach. That's changing the behavior of the end users into a partnering relationship, right? Much different than a service provider. So those are some of the fundamentals that I think are really, really important that we push to. And that leads to another piece, which is you know, we're very focused a lot of times on processes. We speak a lot in the industry like, well, tools don't matter. You know, I used to say that, and I think it was true at a point in time. But now, tools do matter. And you know, we used to have this expression, a fool with a tool is still a fool. You know, but I'll tell you right now, I would take a fool with a tool over a fool with a pen. And I still see it, and I'm still involved in some of these things. Certain managers look for, will just come in and give me the process. Show me the process first. Don't put it into the product. And it's like, we're at a point now where, like, configuration management, I don't want to see your process. I want to see what the capabilities are. What can you discover? How is the data laid out? Does it show me relationship information? How easy is it to create relationships? Let's just move on from some of that stuff. And when you look at DevOps and how they're working towards these frameworks, Gartner has this thing called the DevOps tool chain. And they list out all these different features and capabilities at all the different phases of kind of the DevOps lifecycle. You know, that is all focused on continuous delivery, continuous release, continuous integration, continuous testing. You know, so everything's supposed to tie back to each other. And these feedback loops and these release cycles and how we're managing configuration and what the inventory is. If you were to take the time to document this into a Word document, it would take you 6 to 9 months. Putting some of these tools in places and validating and trying them can take 3 to 5 weeks. So when the traditional IT, the processes are very human focused. We feel like, well, as a human, we need to understand these things. And the reality is you don't. You need to focus on the automation. You need to focus on what the outcome is. Because the reality is your human interactions are slowing things down. They will not work. So, you know, back to frameworks, and even Kaimar says this, ITIL never said you need to have a change advisory board happen once a week at Thursdays at 3 p.m. I don't know why it's Thursday at 3 p.m. 75% of the companies I speak to, that's when they make their change advisory board meetings so that they can review what's happening that weekend. When you have a world where your servers, your applications, your databases are spinning up in microseconds, how in the world is your change advisory board that meets every week? And by the way, this change advisory board, what are they doing? They're reviewing only the top 20. Out of the list of 150 changes that really need to happen to make the business better, they're only reviewing the top 20 because as humans, that's all they can really do. There's too much politics going on. There's too much review process. People who can't even spell, VPN are asking questions about security and availability, and you're interjecting all these opinions in this grandstanding. And I don't mean to be so crass about it, but it's just the reality. I've seen it a million times. I've been involved in it a million times, and they just don't work. Now, ITIL, gives some connotation that these are the things that are supposed to happen. Some argue that that's not what it says. Okay. But that's the interpretation in most organizations, and that's the reality in most organizations. And these high-performing organizations, they don't do it that way. They're using data to drive risk. Risk is automated, right? And they're managing this risk from a perspective of analytics. Who are the teams that make the changes without impact? And so thus, as things are requested and as tasks are assigned, there's no forms to fill out. Right, a coder is saying, "Hey, listen, I need another 5 CPUs to run this piece of code I'm about to release." They put that into their code. This is all declarative language. This is all software-defined infrastructure. So the spinning up of new CPUs, or the adding more compute, or the adding more storage, or the changing of a virtual IP, this isn't a form that you're filling out. This is a developer putting this into code who's worked with the operations team to know what the overall capacity of the system is, and that request is automated. So when you look at that and how those things are provisioned, they don't then say, hey, well, we need to go buy 5 CPUs and go stick them in server 307 on rack 28. That's 1999 talk. That doesn't work anymore. So asset tracking is something that we don't really do as much in these high-performing organizations. That's all automated. If I need more compute, I need more storage, I need more disk, that's automated to my supplier. It goes out and makes that request. The billing all happens. There's already programs in place. There was some asset management up front that established these B2B connectors. And even if it's just a laptop I'm ordering, no one fills out a form for a laptop anymore. It's all part of the natural onboarding process, or it's request through self-service, B2B connected, ordered, asset tagged, delivered with an image. These are how these high-performing organizations are getting things done. They have true supplier automation, and all the capture of the details of the spend, the asset, the software that's put in it is automatically decremented through licenses, because we're automating these build packages and we're in the release of these things. And then we're monitoring it. And this is so different than the processes that are built on paper, because they're waiting for humans to interact with this data. We don't need it. The system can be designed to automate these things and do all the tracking. And guess what? When audit comes, internal audit, compliance audit, regulatory, external audit, pick your audit poison. When it comes, because it was in a system, because it was automated, because we had all the metadata, you push a button and produce a report. There's no more data calls. There's no more backlogging through Excel spreadsheets. Right? That's that rework. That's that unplanned work, or this work that we have to come back and do, and it's just a terrible way to operate. And when the organization sees IT operating like that, and they're trying to say to themselves, hey, how do we create a digital strategy that makes us take our customers' orders and automate them, and we automatically get the cash and we audit that whole order to cash process? When they're thinking about their own business and how their business runs, and they see IT run on paper, or they see IT run in this very manual process or these rudimentary tools, when they have their digital strategy meeting, that's why they're not invited to the meeting. What could IT possibly do to help us with our digital strategy? Well, how could IT possibly help us? They can't even get me a laptop, right? And again, I know that's hard to take or hard to hear, but it is the reality. And what's disappointing is we could be so much more. It's 2017, right? We could be so much more. We should be leading the conversation for digital transformation.
You know, I think so. I think a lot of the organisations that I would engage with would say, do you know, actually we'd love this level of automation. We'd love these processes and tools, but we probably just can't either get the resources or justify them. Do you know, just perhaps it's like a finger in the air. How many organisations have you seen out there that have this access to these processes and tools?
Again, the most of the organizations that I've seen and interacted with, and probably the past 5 years, from a strategic ITSM perspective, have the tools. But their problem was they didn't see themselves as enabling a digital strategy. So things were pushed off or things were siloed, right? They had that heavy focus on human reviews of processes. So asset management sat outside of IT service management, and security was a completely different silo. Now, one of the things that we talk about at Ivanti is we talk a lot about ITSM, right? Because the reality is when you're purchasing an asset or you're utilizing an asset, that asset is part of a service, right? It's somehow helping support the outcome of a service in the service model. The risks associated with that asset are 100% driving your security posture. The financial costs of that asset are 100% driving your IT financial management. So how could it be that there's this group over here who is building asset management processes and asset lifecycle processes and not talking to service management? And how could security people in the CISO's team be talking about security policies and protecting, corporate risk and assets without talking to asset and talking to service management who's making all the changes to those assets? It's unbelievable. And it just boggles my mind. And we're seeing a change. And like I said, the high-performing organizations that I've interacted with, do you know who leads asset management and service management? The CISO. The CIO is kind of really focused on these ideas about innovation. We'll talk about innovation management in a little bit, but the CISO has become the person who has looked at governance, risk, and compliance as the only way for them to be effective at their job. What are the services that are most critical to the business? And we're talking about true business services. Let's start there. Let's figure out our disaster recovery, our high availability, our security posture, our access management, and drill down into the assets from there. And then we'll talk about lockdown and control at a lower level. And they perform exceptionally well, and they probably are the most resilient organizations to failure and security. Right? They don't have this wasted time that most organizations are trying to figure out, how do I make this change if security says it says we can't do it, and we've got this regulatory pressure to get 7 levels of approval, and and sacrifice a firstborn child in order for this thing to get released. It just doesn't work, right?
Yeah, I mean, certainly in some of the organisations I've seen, it would be a procurement conversation completely outside of IT as a way in, which like you say is odd and is a bizarrely siloed approach, really.
Yeah, and I think that's I think when you look at it at the end of the day, IT service management is about decision making. And when you see a lot of the guidance that has come from consultants and from publications, it's about having discussions, right? And it's missed the opportunity to be focused on data. And if you look at what CISOs want to drive towards, they really want data to drive that support. They want data to drive that decision. So they use data to support their their decisions around reducing risk. Where if you think about it, traditional IT used team meetings. You know, and that's not a good effective use of time. They usually are not productive meetings. There's a lot of, again, a lot of posturing. They're trying to rehash what has already happened as a prediction of risk that's going to happen. Hey, Ollie, last time you made a change and it broke something, so you know we're not going to let you make this change next time. Well, you know, the reality is that, hey, wait a second, I've made 137 changes and it failed one time. Really? You know, and what we want to do is we want to better monitor these things to help us drive that. So, you know, again, there is no nebulous business requirement that we're building towards. The business doesn't know where we're going. You know, we don't know what we're doing. Most organizations today, the 5-year planning is truly a dartboard exercise. We're thinking 6 months, a year, right? Well, that's the speed of business today. So we need feedback to determine success. We're not going to use reports. If we wait till the end of the month to see what our SLAs were, it's not going to mean anything to the organization. We need real-time feedback analysis, and this is why you see in the mobile space in these organizations who interact very effectively with from a consumer standpoint, like a Netflix. You know, they've got real-time feedback telling them a video was just slow, or some failure happened, and they're instantly on it, right? They actually almost they proactively break their stuff with this thing called Chaos Monkey. You should check that out and Google that sometime. You know, they're actively going out and shutting down web servers and databases to make sure and test the resilience of their infrastructure. Everything's supposed to be highly available, so if something fails, they can get on it real time. And they use these collaboration tools to communicate that outages and connect with each other. They're not using email. You know, email is so latent driven. It has no queuing capabilities. It's impossible to search. Right? It's got no real-time tagging. It's got no indexing behind it. So when you look at that, if with real collaboration tools embedded into these automation suites where a failure to load code or a system down issue is then popped up as an event, and you take that event, you spin it, and you start chatting with each other, and you're having a real-time, you know, Tiger team interaction and getting on it. That's so different from the old days of setting up a conference call and everybody dialing it at 9 to do the status check, right? We just don't live in that world anymore. We can't live in that world anymore. And so as this stuff is all tracked, again, if it's automated and it's in the system, when it comes to audit, it's a right click. It's not Excel, and it's not helping, forcing us to go back to all this data to try to redefine that. And I think that's the big focus for DevOps, and that we're not trying to be a command and control IT operational excellence. What we're trying to do is we're trying to look at our organization and say, hey, you know, no more structured teams, right? No more agreements. We don't know. None of this critical success factors and KPIs that are heavily defined. These are all requirements. We just don't know what these things are. We're not there, right? So if we say meet the business requirement as our objective, we've kind of already failed. Whereas DevOps, it's very unstructured and collaborative. It's based on targets. They have an expression in DevOps culture called, you know, fail forward, or fail fast and fail forward. What that means is, let's not repeat the same mistake twice. Let's not be so rigid that we're not unwilling to fail, because in failing, you learn.
Yeah.
Right? So did you write a script that's going to now spin up new VMs when capacity hits 80%? Yes. Okay, cool. That's really going to help our environment. That's going to make it more elastic, more proactive, more autonomic. Wonderful. Oh, you screwed up in your script, and you actually you spun up 32 VMs instead of 2. Okay, great. Well, let's tune the script. Right? We monitored that. We watched what happened, and we responded, reacted to it. Okay. No harm, no failure. Let's not do it again. Let's tune that. Let's collaborate. Okay, what could we have done differently? How would we have better written that script? What better monitoring procedures could we put in place? Let's improve this because it could happen again, and we don't want it to happen again. So let's make this environment more resilient by exposing these failures and being more open. And this is why you'll hear a lot of the things about the Toyota production quality system and things like that, because it really is important for us to be able to pull that end-on cord, stop production, and have a team huddle and figure out what's going on. Because we need to test and learn. You know, the business requirement is a myth. It just doesn't exist. And so if you juxtapose that against what we've traditionally seen in IT, I call this the waterfall methodology. Right? Think about the processes it takes to get through these different life cycles of IT services into IT operations. And we've got all these different processes we need to focus on. The purpose of these processes are great. We want to know what's needed, what broke, who's using it, how do we fix it. But think of where the data sits in traditional IT and in these waterfall approaches. The teams are siloed. The data siloed. Ultimately, this leaves us focused on a process I call praying. We pray we got the requirement right. We pray someone tested it. We pray someone fixed it appropriately. You know, prayer is not a good strategy. It's not a great way to work collaboratively and effectively. So when you see these small teams working side by side, they're not cowboy or cowgirl. This continuous release, continuous deployment, continuous integration, when DevOps is done right, everybody has agreed to how we're going to measure our success. Everybody has agreed to what the enterprise service model looks like. The business services are clearly defined, and our execution on assets and changes of assets are clearly understood in relationship to those services. And we store that change knowledge and that planning and the feedback loops and all these things in a central repository. Now ask your customers at SDI, how many of the service desk folks have direct access into the defect tracking system, direct access into the integration test failure and success system? Very few do. Very few have access to that system. It's a siloed system. It's run by a different team. It's massively protected. Well, the reality is if something failed in dev, something failed in integration, it very likely could fail in production as well too. Why would we not expose that, at least in some level, some ranked levels, some labeled level, that, hey, this is what happened previously? Because that's how you learn. That's how you share knowledge. And so you're breaking down these walls. And that's why I say with tier one is going to kind of go away. It's going to go away as we know it. And that's going to fall back into collaborative teams. And service desk people, as we know today, instead of being like the service desk, the single point of contact, their experience and their ability to interact and collect feedback, to listen and respond, to understand and troubleshoot, to ask diagnostic questions, are going to be exceptionally valuable to that developer who doesn't like to speak to humans, doesn't have that skill. So there's our opportunity. It's just reshifting that skill to the appropriate level. And it's changing the way that teams will be managed. We'll still have knowledge, but we're not going to have knowledge bases. Right? We're going to have real-time queryable systems like outage systems and collaborative systems where chat is happening and what's happening right now. And they're going to be more real-time. And then it's going to be disposable knowledge, and it's going to go through a more iterative, faster life cycle. Because once that becomes more operational into this new paradigm, what that does is that frees up time for us to focus on the really important things. Like we said, innovation management is a major focus for CIOs. So creating ideation, formalizing the way that we automate this, understanding true business demand and opportunities, and having some process around validation and how we validate and pivot and change what's working for us and what's not. right? So you're not going to see a project management office in the future because it hasn't really provided a lot of value, and it's not going to. You're going to see project management embedded into taking things from managing its innovative life cycle to then bringing it more into that service management operationalized. I'm not talking particularly bimodal IT like Gartner describes it, but just having the oversight to take things that are, hey, we should be doing this, to, yeah, this is core to our business, right? Because those are two different things, and again, the business doesn't know. That requirement's a myth. We have to test and learn. And you're going to see enterprise architecture move from its ivory tower into a much more active role here. Understanding the tool chains, understanding what's working, finding the forums where collaborative knowledge and understanding is available to them as an organization, and tapping into that crowdsourced power. So you're going to see a whole new shift for IT, and I think it's a great shift. It's exciting to me, and it actually provides a ton of opportunity for those who are in traditional service desks to leverage their skills, to leverage their focus on quality, to leverage their human interaction, to leverage their understanding of troubleshooting and customer service skills to provide feedback and user experience data, because it really is all about the experience here at the end of the day.
Cool, thank you. Really cool presentation. Loads of information there. John, we've got a couple of minutes left, I think, just for a question. John, I've been asking a few questions as we've been going along, so thank you everyone who's popped those through. And like I said, I've been throwing those to Matt as we've gone along. We've got one just to finish us off here from Duncan, which is, how does the increase in velocity caused by DevOps relate to better customer experiences?
Yeah, it's core to the customer experience, because when you have an idea or a new feature or a new capability, when it takes so long to get released, the customer never has value until they're actually able to benefit from it. So let's give an example like the mobile application. If say that I'm a customer of JetBlue. And my mobile application, it's hard for me to find my next upcoming flight, or real time I don't get my gate changes or things like that. That's going to require code changes. That's going to require a change cycle. If I have to wait weeks on weeks for me to get that change, well then what's happened is if we follow that kind of waterfall methodology and it took that long for it to get to me, I didn't get any value out of that. Now let's say at the end of the day they finally deliver it to me in my app, and it's really not what I was looking for. I didn't want the gate change to show up scrolled down off the bottom of the page. I wanted to be popped up at the top of the page. I wanted a big red banner, hey, your gate has changed. I wanted actually to send me a notification. So I'm sorry, when I said that I wanted the gate change information, I didn't mean at the bottom of the page. Now I have to wait, what, 4 more weeks for that to happen? See, when in continuous release, and what DevOps has taken now is this approach of let's trial it, right? They may even do A/B testing. They may send it to 5 different segments of their customer base, 5 different places on the page, and then pop a feedback loop saying, hey, did you notice the new notification of gate change? Did this work for you? 1 through 5 stars, or unhappy face, stale face, smiley face. This is what we're talking about. It's a real-time feedback loop. And if you did that, and you put that out in just a couple of days, or in a week sprint or a 2-week sprint, immediately you're going to have feedback. Now, okay, let's say that 4 out of the 5 hated it. Well, that one person who loved it, let's go ahead and test that again. Let's roll that out 50-50. Let's see if we get the exact same responses. Now we do, right? Now we're testing and we're learning, we're tuning, and so it's changed on some people's mobile apps. Maybe that was a little frustrating, but now you've got a solution that's going to work for mostly everybody, and that's where the real satisfaction and adoption is going to come in, right? So that's one of the key things, is this continuous delivery helps us understand, did we get it right? Are we getting it right? And until you actually release it in production, you don't know. It's just a hypothesis. It's just a guess.
Cool, perfect, thank you. I think, John, it's a great question from Duncan there, because I think you know in your answer you're able to capture all of the key tenets of DevOps and what it means for the business user, for that person at the other end. Well, John, that's literally all the time we have left. So all that's left for me to say thank you, Matt, for a great presentation. Really cool discussing some of the key points of DevOps there. So thank you for coming along.
My pleasure, Ollie. It was great chatting with you.
Thank you. And of course, thank you to Ivanti for sponsoring the webinar, and to everyone who's attended. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks a lot.
Cheers.